All right, so get ready, because we're going deep on this one.
Oh, yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount. You know, one of the most well-known speeches in history, right?
For sure.
You sent over some sources, and you really want to understand
Right.
how all this ancient teaching can apply to us today, even if
Yeah.
we aren't exactly living in biblical times. And it's not just about, like, being good. There's some seriously surprising stuff here.
Yeah.
About inner strength and about challenging, like, societal norms and a love that's, well, pretty radical.
You're right. It's not your typical self-help book. This sermon gets to the core of what it means to live a fulfilling life. And it does it in a way that still resonates centuries later.
You know, one thing that really hit me was this idea of mourning leading to comfort.
Right.
That sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
How can feeling sad or grieving actually bring peace?
It is. It is one of those paradoxes that makes you think, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you look into the original Greek, the word for mourn, it goes beyond just sadness. It's like a deep awareness of the brokenness in ourselves and in the world around us.
Right.
And a yearning for something better.
So it's like acknowledging the bad stuff is actually the first step to finding real peace.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the source material points out that, like, recognizing this brokenness leads to a unique kind of comfort.
Okay.
A consolation that comes from turning to something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
It compares it to the solace a child finds in a loving parent's arms.
Yeah.
It's a peace the world can't offer.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does this mourning lead to action? Like, how do we not get stuck in the sadness?
It's a valid concern. But the Sermon on the Mount doesn't advocate for wallowing in it.
Okay.
It's about letting that mourning fuel a desire for positive change.
Right.
Think of it like this. If you see someone hurting, you feel that pain alongside them, and it motivates you to help.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Right. Okay, so the Beatitudes, those are kind of like the foundation of the sermon, right? Like a blueprint for a blessed life.
Right.
But the idea of blessed here is pretty different from what we usually think of, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about material wealth or success, is it?
Absolutely not. The first Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, is a great example.
Right.
It's not about being financially poor. It's about humility.
The source material was very clear about that.
Yeah.
It's recognizing our need for something beyond ourselves. It's like that image of a boat needing an anchor to stay steady in a storm. Without that anchor, we're just drifting.
Exactly.
Frankly.
And that anchor, in this context,
Yeah.
is our faith,
Yeah.
our reliance on God. It's acknowledging that even our best efforts are ultimately only possible because of His grace. Now, that might sound like a passive concept, but it actually leads to incredible inner strength.
It's like admitting you need help is actually what gives you the power to move forward.
Precisely. And the source material even gives a practical example of how we can cultivate this poverty of spirit in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Take time to be grateful for everything you have, even the small things.
Right.
Recognize that every good thing is a gift, not something you earned entirely on your own.
Yeah.
It shifts your perspective and deepens your connection to the divine.
That's a good reminder. Okay, the next beatitude is, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted, which we already talked about.
Right.
And then there's, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
Now, this one always trips me up because meek sounds so weak. But the source material is pretty adamant that that's not what it means at all.
Yes, that's one of the most misunderstood words in the entire sermon.
Right.
Meekness, in this context, isn't about being a pushover or letting people walk all over you. It's about controlled strength, a calmness that comes from trusting in God's justice and knowing you don't have to fight every battle yourself.
So it's more like inner strength that doesn't need to prove itself through aggression.
Exactly. Think of someone like Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
He spent years imprisoned for his beliefs, but he never lost his composure or dignity. That's meekness in action.
Wow. That's a powerful example.
And
And inheriting the earth, that's not about literally owning land, right?
No, it's about experiencing a life of peace and purpose.
Right.
Right now, not some far-off promise.
Okay.
It's about being able to navigate the challenges of life with a calm and steady heart,
Right.
even amidst chaos.
So it's like that inner peace allows you to actually enjoy life.
Yes.
To truly inherit the beauty and goodness that it offers.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And The source material even challenges us to think about how we can cultivate this meekness in our own lives. In a world that often rewards aggression and loud voices. Yeah. It's a radical concept.
It is.
But it's one that leads to true inner peace and strength.
All right, let's tackle the next one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. This sounds like it's about standing up for what's right, fighting for justice.
It definitely includes that.
Yeah.
But it goes deeper. Think of it as like a constant longing to align yourself with God's principles.
Okay.
A deep desire to embody his will in everything you do.
Okay.
The source material describes it as like a burning passion.
Yeah.
A relentless pursuit of what's good and true.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard.
I love that image that the source used, swimming against the current.
Yeah.
It's like, even when everyone else is going with the flow, you're determined to stay true to your values.
Right.
Even if it means going against the grain.
That's a powerful way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And it connects directly to your potential for action.
Yeah.
How can you be an agent of justice in a world riddled with inequality? It's a call to step up and make a difference, even if it means being unpopular.
But it also emphasizes that this righteousness has to start with us.
Absolutely.
Right. It's not just about pointing fingers at others.
Yes.
It's about making sure our own lives reflect this deep desire for what's good and right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Jesus calls for personal integrity.
Right.
Ensuring our actions align with our beliefs.
Okay.
Even when no one is watching.
Okay. The last beatitude we'll cover in this section is, Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
Right.
This one seems pretty straightforward. Be kind to others. But the source material suggests it's much deeper than that.
It is. Mercy isn't just about being nice.
Okay.
It's a deliberate choice to offer kindness and forgiveness.
Okay.
Especially to those who seem to least deserve it. It's about breaking the cycle of hurt and revenge by extending grace.
Yeah.
Even when every fiber of your being wants to retaliate.
The source material gives this really intense example of choosing forgiveness even when you've been deeply wronged. It's easy to say be merciful, but actually doing it, especially in the face of real pain, that takes incredible strength.
It does. But the promise attached to this beatitude is amazing. The measure we use for others will be used for us. So the more merciful we are, the more mercy we receive. It's like a spiritual boomerang.
Right.
What we put out into the world ultimately comes back to us.
I've definitely experienced that in my own life.
Yeah.
Sometimes showing mercy was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But it always led to healing, both for me and the other person.
That's the power of mercy.
Oh.
It has the potential to transform not only individual relationships, but the world around us.
So we've talked about the Beatitudes, this foundation for living a truly blessed life.
Yes.
But the Sermon on the Mount goes beyond inner qualities, right? It also talks about how this inner transformation translates into action.
You're right.
Yeah.
Sermon on the Mount doesn't just tell us how to be. It tells us how to act.
Okay.
And it uses some incredibly vivid imagery.
Right.
To get its point across.
Yeah, like the metaphors of salt and light, which really stuck with me.
Absolutely.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Yeah. It's such a powerful way to describe the impact we're supposed to have on the world around us.
Those metaphors have resonated with people for centuries.
Right.
Salt enhances flavor. It preserves.
Yeah.
Light dispels darkness. It guides.
Right.
Jesus is saying that as his followers, our presence should have a similar effect on the world.
The source material had this great analogy about food without salt being bland.
Right.
Just like a world without active faith lacks purpose and meaning.
Right.
It's like we're not just here to blend in, we're meant to make things better.
Exactly.
More flavor.
And like light.
Yeah.
Our actions should be visible, a beacon for others to see.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just talk the talk.
Yeah.
Our lives need to back it up.
There's that emphasis on authenticity again, which keeps coming up.
Right.
Being real, not just putting on a show. Yeah. But that also means having the courage to stand out, to be different, right? The source even asked if we have the guts to be light, even when the world seems to prefer darkness.
That's a challenge, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, let's talk about another big theme in the sermon.
Okay.
Peacemaking. The source material emphasizes that it's about way more than just avoiding conflict.
Right. It's not just about keeping quiet when things get heated.
Right.
It's about proactively building reconciliation and understanding and harmony.
The source material connects this to our everyday relationships. Like, how can we mediate disputes?
Yeah.
Whether it's in our families, our workplaces, our communities, it's about being a bridge builder instead of a wall builder, right?
That's a great image.
Yeah.
It's so closely tied to our identity as children of God.
Right.
If God is the ultimate peacemaker,
right,
then embodying that peace reflects our true nature.
Okay, now we're getting into some of the tougher teachings.
Right.
The source material doesn't shy away from the fact that following God's way can lead to opposition.
Yeah.
Even persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that's a little scary to think about.
It's understandable to feel that way.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that Jesus himself experienced persecution.
Yeah.
In fact, the source material suggests that facing opposition
Yeah.
for doing what's right is a sign
Yeah.
you're on the right path, that
Yeah.
you're walking in Jesus's footsteps.
That's kind of a radical way to look at it. Instead of being something to fear, it's like a validation that you're living
Right.
according to your values.
Exactly. It's a testament to your commitment to righteousness.
Right.
And the source offers comfort
Right.
from an eternal perspective.
Okay.
The reward for standing firm isn't earthly.
Right.
It belongs to the kingdom of heaven.
So it's about keeping your eyes on the bigger picture, not
Right.
getting bogged down by temporary setbacks or criticism.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you know, there's this encouraging detail
Okay.
that the source mentions.
Okay.
Each challenge we face refines our faith like fire purifying gold. It makes us stronger, more resilient.
Okay, but then there's this almost impossible teaching about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you.
Right.
I mean, how is that even humanly possible?
It is a radical concept, isn't it? And it's certainly not easy.
Yeah.
But it's about recognizing the humanity in
Yes.
everyone, even those who have wronged us.
Okay.
It's about seeking their well-being, not just tolerating them.
The source asks if we've ever been deeply wronged,
Mm-hmm.
and then challenges us to imagine responding with love instead of retaliation.
Right.
That's a tall order.
It is. But it's the kind of love that Jesus embodied.
Right.
Think of him forgiving those who crucified him.
Right.
That's the ultimate example of God's love.
Wow.
And it's the love we're called to reflect.
It's almost like a superpower, right? To be able to love like that.
It is a superpower, and it's one that's available to all of us.
Yeah.
Through the Holy Spirit.
Right.
It's not something we can do on our own,
Right.
but with God's help, we can tap into that limitless capacity
Right.
for love and forgiveness.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The Beatitudes, salt and light, peacemaking, persecution, loving your enemies.
Right.
It's intense, but I'm starting to see how all these teachings fit together.
You're right. There's a definite thread running through all of this.
Yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount isn't just a list of rules. It's a call to a deeper way of living, a way of being in the world
Yeah.
that's rooted in love and compassion
Yeah.
and an unwavering commitment to what's right,
Right.
even when it's hard.
Right.
And that's something that's as relevant today
Yeah.
as it was 2,000 years ago.
Absolutely. Now, the Sermon on the Mount doesn't just focus on outward actions,
Right.
right? It really emphasizes the importance
Yes.
of our inner lives, our thoughts,
Right.
and motivations.
Yes. There's a strong emphasis on the heart throughout the sermon.
Okay.
It's not just about what we do, it's about why we do it.
Like the teaching on anger, for example.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just controlling our outward behavior.
Right.
It addresses the root of anger, even unexpressed anger,
Mm-hmm.
and how destructive it can be to our inner peace.
You're right. The Sermon on the Mount recognizes
Yeah.
that inner turmoil can be just as damaging as outward actions.
Right.
It calls us to cultivate a peaceful heart, even amidst difficult circumstances.
I remember the source material had this really specific piece of advice. Reconcile with others before presenting yourself to God. It's
Yeah.
like get your relational house in order
Yeah,
before you focus on your spiritual one.
that's a powerful point.
Yeah.
It challenges us to prioritize healthy relationships
Yeah.
and address conflict in a constructive way.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for our part in disagreements
Right.
and seeking reconciliation, even when it's difficult.
Then there's the teaching on adultery, which, whoa, it goes way beyond the physical act. It's about guarding our thoughts and desires, making sure they're aligned with God's will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source material asks, are we nurturing only what is pure and pleasing to God
Yeah.
in our minds and hearts?
It's a call to radical self-awareness and discipline when it comes to our thoughts and fantasies.
Yes.
And it even gives this, honestly, pretty extreme piece of advice. Remove things from our lives that cause us to stumble, even if it's difficult. Like, If something is tempting you to sin, even if it's not inherently bad, get rid of it.
It's a challenging teaching, for sure,
right.
but it speaks to the importance of creating an environment that supports our spiritual growth.
Okay.
And helps us stay true to our values.
There's also a section about oaths and honesty that really stood out to me.
Okay.
It basically says that our word should be enough.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't need to swear or make elaborate promises to be believed.
Right. It's about cultivating a life of such integrity that our yes means yes. And our no means no.
Right.
There's no need for fancy oaths if our words are consistently truthful.
The source material connects this to our everyday experiences. Like, how often do we exaggerate or manipulate to get our way right? Honesty, even when it's hard, is a form of freedom.
It is. It frees us from the burden of keeping up appearances or hiding our true selves.
Right.
And it builds trust in our relationships, which is essential for a fulfilling life.
So we've explored a lot of the key teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. The Beatitudes, the metaphors of salt and light, peacemaking, dealing with opposition, even those challenging teachings on anger, adultery, and honesty. It's a lot to digest, but there's a clear message emerging here.
Right.
It's about inner transformation, leading to a more fulfilling life.
And that's one of the key takeaways from the Sermon on the Mount.
Okay.
Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it.
Right.
To take it to a deeper level. It's not about blind rule following. It's about letting God's law shape our character and motivations from the inside out.
Right. It's like, it's not enough to just follow the rules.
Right.
It's about understanding the spirit behind them and letting that shape who we are at our core.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount invites us to go beyond mere obedience and embrace a lifestyle of genuine love, compassion, and integrity.
The source material even asks a really thought-provoking question. Do our actions stem from a desire to please God or just fear of punishment? It made me think about my own motivations. Like, am I doing things just to avoid getting in trouble, or am I truly trying to live a life that honors God?
That's a question we should all ask ourselves regularly, I think.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the do's and don'ts.
Right.
But the Sermon on the Mount challenges us to examine our hearts.
Right.
And make sure our actions are aligned with our deepest values.
It's like the difference between going through the motions and really living with intention.
Exactly. It's about aligning our will with God's will, not out of fear, but out of love and a desire for a deeper, more meaningful life.
Yeah.
And that's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It's a constant process of growth and transformation.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the big picture themes in the Sermon on the Mount. But there are also these like more specific teachings that can be tricky to apply in our modern lives. Like the section on judging others, for example.
Right.
It feels like we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to judge, to have an opinion on everything.
It's true. Our culture thrives on judgment and criticism.
Yeah.
But the Sermon on the Mount offers a radically different perspective.
Okay.
Judge not, that you be not judged, Jesus says.
Right.
It's a call to practice empathy and understanding.
Okay.
To look beyond outward appearances and try to see the heart.
The source material made a great point about this.
Yeah.
It said that judging others often stems from our own insecurities, like we
project our own fears and judgments onto others as a way of deflecting from our own shortcomings.
That's a profound insight. Instead of pointing fingers, the Sermon on the Mount encourages us to look inward and address our own flaws before criticizing others.
It's like that classic saying, take the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source material also highlights the importance of seeking reconciliation when conflict arises.
Right.
It's not about sweeping things under the rug or pretending everything is fine.
Right.
It's about having those difficult conversations with a spirit of humility and a desire to restore harmony.
It's about being willing to admit when we're wrong and seeking forgiveness.
Precisely. And it's about extending that same grace and forgiveness to others, even when they've hurt us deeply.
That's tough, but I guess that's where the loving your enemies thing comes in.
Right.
Speaking of tough, the Sermon on the Mount also talks about anxiety and worry.
Absolutely.
Which is something I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world.
It feels like we're constantly bombarded with reasons to be anxious.
Yeah, for sure.
But the Sermon on the Mount offers a surprisingly simple antidote. Trust in God's provision.
The source material uses the example of the birds and flowers,
Yeah.
God takes care of them.
Right.
So why wouldn't he take care of us?
It's a beautiful analogy, isn't it? It reminds us that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
That there's a higher power who loves and cares for us, even in the midst of uncertainty and chaos.
But it's not just about sitting back and expecting God to do everything for us, is it?
No, it's about finding that balance between taking action and surrendering control.
Okay.
The source material makes a great point about this. It says that worry is like a rocking chair.
Oh, okay.
It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I've definitely spent countless hours in that.
We all have.
Metaphorical rocking chair.
But the Sermon on the Mount encourages us to step out of that chair and focus on what we can control, to take action where we can, and trust God with the rest.
It's about finding that sweet spot between faith and action.
Exactly. It's not about being passive. It's about channeling our energy and focus towards what truly matters.
Right.
And letting go of the things we can't change.
The Sermon on the Mount also talks about prayer, which can be another one of those things that feels kind of mysterious and intimidating.
It can be, especially if we have preconceived notions about what prayer should look like.
Right.
But the Sermon on the Mount presents a very personal and accessible view of prayer.
The source material emphasizes that it's not about elaborate rituals or trying to impress God with our words. It's about simply opening our hearts to him, sharing our joys and sorrows, and seeking his guidance.
That's right. Prayer, as described in the Sermon on the Mount, is a conversation with a loving Father, not a performance. It's about cultivating that intimate connection with God and allowing his presence to fill our lives.
The source material even shared the specific words Jesus gave his disciples when they asked him how to pray. The Lord's Prayer.
Yes, and it's a beautiful model for how we can approach prayer.
Right.
It's simple yet profound. It covers all the essential elements. Acknowledging God's sovereignty, seeking his will, asking for forgiveness and provision, and recognizing our need for his protection.
It's interesting that the Lord's Prayer starts with, "Our Father, not my Father."
That's a crucial detail.
Yeah.
It reminds us that prayer is not just an individualistic pursuit. It's about connecting with God.
Right.
As part of a larger community.
It's about praying for others.
Exactly.
It's ourselves.
And that sense of community is woven throughout the Sermon on the Mount.
Okay.
It's not just about our individual relationship with God. It's about how that relationship shapes our interactions with others.
Like that whole section on giving to the needy. It's not just about throwing money at a problem.
Right.
It's about doing it with the right heart, with genuine compassion.
Right. The Sermon on the Mount challenges us to go beyond simply fulfilling an obligation and to see every act of generosity as an opportunity to express God's love to others.
The source material even uses the phrase, "Let not your left hand know what your right hand is doing."
It's a beautiful image, isn't it? It's about giving without seeking recognition or praise, doing it purely out of a desire to help those in need.
It's like the motivation matters.
Absolutely.
Just as much as the action itself.
And the Sermon on the Mount is all about aligning our motivations with God's heart.
Right.
So that our actions flow naturally from that deep well of love and compassion.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about judging others, dealing with anxiety, the power of prayer, giving to the needy, and so much more.
It feels like the Sermon on the Mount really addresses all aspects of life.
It does, doesn't it? It's a comprehensive guide to living a life that's aligned with God's will and reflects his character in every area.
But it's not just about following a bunch of rules, is it?
No, it's about embracing a transformative way of being in the world.
Yes.
A way of living that's rooted in love, humility, and a deep trust in God's provision and guidance.
Yes.
And that's a message that resonates just as powerfully today as it did centuries ago.
Absolutely.
Okay, but let's be real. Some of these teachings are hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. Like the section on forgiveness, for example.
Right.
How are we supposed to forgive someone who's hurt us deeply?
It's one of the most challenging teachings in the entire Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the most liberating.
The source material made a point of saying that forgiveness isn't about condoning the wrong that was done. It's not about saying it was okay.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about releasing the bitterness and resentment that we hold on to, which ultimately harms us more than the person who hurt us.
Yeah.
It's about breaking free from the cycle of pain and choosing to move forward with a healed heart.
But it's not about forgetting
Right.
what happened. Right.
No, it's about acknowledging the pain, allowing ourselves to grieve it, and then making the conscious choice to let go of the anger and resentment.
The source material even compared unforgiveness to drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Holding on to unforgiveness only hurts us in the end.
Okay, so forgiveness is about releasing ourselves from the burden of bitterness. But how do we actually do that? It feels impossible sometimes.
It's definitely not easy. It's a process.
Right.
And it often requires seeking help from others, whether it's a therapist, a trusted friend, or a spiritual mentor. And ultimately, it's about tapping into God's grace because, let's face it, forgiveness is a supernatural act.
Right.
It's not something we can do on our own strength.
All right. The source material even suggests praying for the person who hurt us.
It is.
I mean, that's next level.
It is. But it's incredibly powerful. Praying for someone who's hurt us can shift our perspective.
Right.
Help us see them with compassion and open our hearts to forgiveness.
So forgiveness is a journey, not a destination.
That's right.
And it's not about condoning wrong. It's about releasing ourselves from the burden of bitterness.
That's a great summary.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Sermon on the Mount offers a roadmap for that journey, a path towards healing and wholeness that's available to all of us, no matter how deeply we've been hurt.
Okay, so we've talked about forgiveness. Another challenging teaching in the Sermon on the Mount is the concept of turning the other cheek.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that just letting people walk all over you?
It's a teaching that's often misinterpreted.
Okay.
It's not about being passive or allowing ourselves to be abused. It's about responding to aggression with a surprising and unexpected act of love and humility.
The source material makes a distinction between passivity and nonviolent resistance. Turning the other cheek isn't about weakness.
Right.
It's about refusing to engage in the cycle of violence and choosing a different path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about breaking the pattern of retaliation and offering a different way of interacting with conflict. Think of it like pouring water on a fire instead of throwing more fuel on it.
It's about de-escalating the situation instead of adding to the heat. Right.
That's a great way to put it. And, you know, the source material points out that this approach takes incredible courage and strength.
Right.
It's not for the faint of heart.
I can see that. It's easy to react with anger and aggression.
Yeah.
But choosing a path of peace and nonviolence, that's radical.
It is. And it's a powerful witness to the transformative power of love, even in the face of hostility and hatred.
The Sermon on the Mount also talks about material possessions and wealth, which is something that can be really tricky to navigate in our consumer-driven culture.
We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need more, that our worth is tied to what we own. But the Sermon on the Mount offers a radically different perspective.
Right.
It encourages us to detach from material possessions and find our security and identity in something much deeper and more lasting.
The source material uses the phrase, "You cannot serve both God and money." It's like we have to choose where our ultimate allegiance lies.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It's not about demonizing money or saying that all wealth is bad.
Right.
It's about recognizing the potential for money to become an idol, something that we worship and prioritize above everything else.
It's about putting our trust in God's provision, not in our bank accounts.
Exactly. And, you know, the source material even suggests that generosity is the antidote to materialism.
Okay.
When we focus on giving to others, it shifts our focus away from our own wants and desires and helps us cultivate a spirit of gratitude and contentment.
It's like the more we give, the less we need.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Right.
Generosity is a powerful force that not only blesses others, but also transforms our own hearts.
Right.
It frees us from the grip of materialism and helps us find true joy and satisfaction in using our resources to make a positive impact on the world.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive into the Sermon on the Mount, from the Beatitudes to forgiveness to turning the other cheek to generosity and so much more.
Right.
It's clear that these teachings are not just for people living in biblical times. They offer timeless wisdom that can help us navigate the complexities of modern life.
You're absolutely right. The Sermon on the Mount is a blueprint for a life of purpose, meaning, and deep fulfillment. It's a call to embrace a radically different way of being in the world, a way that's rooted in love, humility, and a deep trust in God's goodness and grace.
It's challenging for sure, but it's also incredibly inspiring. It's like a vision of what's possible when we to align our lives with God's heart and let his love transform us from the inside out.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
And I think the source material leaves us with a powerful question to ponder.
Okay.
How will you allow the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount to shape your life today?
That's a great question to sit with. It's not just about understanding these teachings intellectually. It's about allowing them to penetrate our hearts and transform the way we live, the way we love, and the way we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. And that's an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
A process of continually learning, growing, and striving to embody the radical love and grace that Jesus so beautifully exemplified in the Sermon on the Mount.
It's like the Sermon on the Mount is this incredible roadmap, right, to a more fulfilling life, but it's not always easy to follow the directions.
That's true. It's not a passive listen.
Right.
It demands something of us. It challenges us to examine our own lives and make choices that aren't always easy or copper.
The source material made a point of saying that living out the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount is a countercultural act. It goes against the grain of our society's values in so many ways.
That's a really important observation.
Right.
We live in a world that often prioritizes self-interest and competition and accumulation of wealth.
Right.
The Sermon on the Mount calls us to a different set of values.
Yeah.
Humility, compassion, generosity, forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's a radical alternative to the status quo.
And it's not just about changing our individual behavior.
Right.
Right. The Sermon on the Mount has implications for how we interact with the world around us, for how we address injustice and inequality.
Absolutely. The Sermon on the Mount isn't meant to be lived out in isolation. It calls us to be agents of change, to work for justice and peace in our communities and in the world at large.
The source material even talks about the concept of being salt and light in society. It's like we're called to have a positive influence on the world around us, to make it a better place.
Those metaphors are so powerful. Salt preserves.
Yeah.
It adds flavor.
Right.
Light dispels darkness. It guides.
Yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount challenges us to be those things in a world that can often feel dark and decaying.
It's about not just accepting things as they are, but working to make them better, to bring light and hope into the places that need it most.
Exactly. And, you know, the source material also highlighted the importance of living out these teachings authentically. It's not about putting on a show or pretending to be something we're not. It's about letting our actions flow naturally from a transformed heart.
There's that emphasis on the heart again. It's like, it's not enough to just do the right things. It's about having the right motivations, the right attitude.
That's one of the key takeaways from the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
It's not just about outward behavior. It's about inner transformation. It's about letting God's love shape our hearts and minds.
Okay.
So that our actions reflect his character in every area of our lives.
Okay, so we've explored a lot of deep and challenging concepts in this deep dive.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what's the takeaway for the listener? How do we actually put all this into practice in our everyday lives?
It's a great question. And I think the source material offers some practical guidance.
Okay.
It suggests starting small, focusing on one teaching at a time, and asking God to help us apply it in a tangible way.
So maybe pick one beatitude and try to live it out this week. Or focus on being more intentional with our words, like the section on honesty talked about.
Exactly. It's about taking those small steps consistently.
Right.
And trusting that over time, those small changes will add up to a significant transformation in our lives.
And it's not about doing it perfectly, right? It's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely. The Sermon on the Mount isn't a set of rules to follow rigidly. It's an invitation to an ongoing journey of growth and transformation.
Right.
And it's a journey we don't have to take alone. We have God's grace, his guidance, and his power working in us and through us.
I love that. It's not about striving to be good enough.
Yeah.
It's about allowing God's love to shape us and empower us to live lives that reflect his character.
That's beautifully said. And I think the source material left us with a really powerful challenge.
Okay.
What does it look like for you to live out the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah.
In your unique context, with your unique gifts and passions?
That's a great question to ponder. It's about taking these timeless principles and finding creative ways to apply them in our modern lives, in our relationships, in our communities, and in the world around us.
Exactly. The Sermon on the Mount isn't just an ancient text.
Right.
It's a living, breathing message that has the power to transform our lives.
Right.
And make the world a better place.
Well, that was quite a deep dive.
It was.
We covered so much ground, from the Beatitudes to the challenge of living out these teachings in a countercultural way. Hopefully you're feeling inspired and maybe a little challenged to dig deeper into the Sermon on the Mount and see how it can impact your life.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount truly offers timeless wisdom.
Yeah.
That's just as relevant today as it was centuries ago.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep growing.